Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited and happy today that I have as my guest Lisa Greenfield. She is a hand analyst, the founder and CEO of Truth in Hand. She's an intuitive reader. She does astrological forecasts for e-news online. She has a lifetime of experience reading the hands of celebrities and regular folks alike to aid them in identifying their blocks and how to access their untapped potential. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Mary. I just love being back with you on Her Story. That's one of my favorite titles. I think the best. So love that you came up with that. And
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I invented it. I did not. I found out as I did research when I first launched this that it was a term coined in the 60s by the women's lib movement. But I really like the name anyway, so I kept it. But I didn't invent it, but I love it too. So
well, you know what? Here's the thing. At the same time, you may have been channeling the unconscious, the collective unconscious when you tapped into it. You may not have actively seen it someplace, but you retrieved it. And it's like, and points to you for doing that. So,
well, thank you. Okay, so we got a lot of ground to cover. You are a wealth of information I can't wait to get into. But let's just start with this. First, with the hand analyst that you do, then we'll move into the astrology, what's going on in the skies, how that is affecting us here on this planet, in this country especially. So I guess my first question would be, what can you tell about a person by looking at their hand?
Well, one of the things that I was fascinated by, I started out studying brain biology at 14 because I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. I didn't understand why when you cut your finger, the nerves would regenerate, but when you cut your spine, it didn't. And it's like, somebody's got to figure that out, And so I thought I was going to. Turns out I'm the equivalent of dyslexic in math. So neurosurgery was spared my entry. But about the same time, I started studying palmistry, the old school palmistry, but being of a more scientific bend, it's like, well, there's Indian palmistry and there's Chinese palmistry and there's these ancient ways. Let's look at that and then start mapping it to the brain biology, only to find out that it's like, wow, there was such a network there. And this is actually, they did it by astrology. Believe it or not, back in the 17, 1800s, doctors at that time were required to be astrologers because, again, it gave us kind of a map. All right. And so the map in your hands, believe it or not, it corresponds with regions of the brain. So as you think, feel, and act on things in specific ways, it maps in your hands in lines and in mounds and blood flow. And it's very interesting to see. Do you want to hear a fun example of how I tested that?
Absolutely.
Okay, I have to do it anecdotally because I don't have a research lab at my disposal. But being in Hollywood, I was invited to work at the stunt Emmys. They give awards for the people who are behind the scenes, and so they have their own party around the Emmys. Well, I was thrilled to be invited because I wanted to test this out. The Mars line in your hand has to do with courage and risk taking. And so I went to the stunt Emmys and there was this one big group, about 14, 15 people. And I said, can you guys, do this test with me? Don't say a word. Nobody say a word about who does what. Let me just do a risk assessment based on the lines in your hand. And they all agreed. And I said, okay, blank faces, you're actors. So don't give anything away. Let's get all the way around. Well, the second guy in was called Big Dave. He was about 6'7" and a wall of human, not an ounce of fat coming at you, but it's just huge. And I looked at his hands and I went, huh, you don't have a high risk, factor. You're more of a middle line. In fact, you've got more of an architectural, it's that, beauty and science. It's that back and forth. Kept going all the way around. And then the last person was she was this little sparklet, about 5 foot nothing. And, not skinny, but, not heavy, but just this live wire. I looked at her hands and I went, I'm not getting in any vehicle that you drive. And at that point, because I'd gotten all the way around, they all started laughing. they gave it away. It turns out she was the stunt double on Tom Cruise Mission Impossible for 2 of his movies, because she would do motorcycle stunts that nobody else would even try.
No
And
kidding.
Big Dave, he was a civil engineer that they recruited as the stunt supervisor. He did all the safety tests. So it's like, that's
Amazing.
new. It's like, okay, then this to me, it's like, that's the kind of thing where it's like, it gives me enough concrete ground to then investigate and ask more questions. And because I worked in the corporate world for so many years, I got to do this on the side. I didn't rely on it for my living. So I didn't have to worry about, who I read for. I just got to read a lot of people, a lot of people. And it gave me more and more information that I would then track back to the neurobiology and the astrology. So there's this little triangle going on, which is part of why I was looking forward to talking to you today, too.
Well, I'm looking forward to everything that you have to share. I know you have a lot to share astrologically too. I just have a couple more questions about the hand before we, even though you say they're all connected, right? Because I know this is what everybody always wants to know. Love and money, love and money. Can you tell by looking at a person's hand if they're destined for a loving relationship, if they are going to have financial struggle, or if they're going to have an abundant life? Can you tell that kind of stuff?
Yes and no. There's one of those mix answers. You can tell if somebody has the raw ingredients. You can tell that there are some people, like there's the M for magic. Some people say it's for money. Some people say it's for marriage, but there's an M that can show up in your hands in a couple different places.
I have a one.
Got a big, exactly. Here's the thing about that. You have the ability to turn lead into gold, like magic. That doesn't mean that you have an easy life. And in fact, a lot of my magicians, which they're about 13 to 14% of the population on last assessment. I don't know what the most recent assessment was, but it's one of these where we all come standard with our intuition, which senses something beyond our lived experience. Then our hearts, which get invested in what we sense, but we don't know yet. And then our mind, which actually then figures out how, and our body, which acts on it. Magicians have an easier time lining it up that way, sensing what's beyond the known, finding the ones that really attract and draw them, acting on it with the mind third. And that's not the way most people act mind first in the Western world. So it's like backing into a door with the wide end of a triangle first. Okay, so it's like, but magicians go intuition first, heart second, mind third, body fourth. And so you have the ability to move more easily through the ups and downs in life. Doesn't mean you aren't going to have them. Okay.
So is this, like when you go see a psychic or something, what they tell you is a possibility. So
Yep.
is that pretty much kind of like what you're saying too, like the raw ingredients are there, but it's up to you how you put them together or whether you use them or not. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely, absolutely. And right now, by the way, I am in a couple of different communities with highly intuitive and psychic people. I don't prefer the title psychic. I prefer intuitive, but that's my preference. I'm still in there with them. And there's a lot of them who are struggling right now because we're in one of the most raw cauldrons of potential that we've seen in, centuries. All right. And so what that means is you can, as a psychic, look at something one day and you're reading what what for the person, you're reading what's possible. And within 24 hours, everything can change.
Really?
So, yes, this is the place where it gets very exciting. We have so much raw creation potential right now, but it's almost as if it's cement and it's starting to harden. In as we move into 25, 20, and 26, it's going to solidify when things move into the much more. Right now, Jupiter and Uranus were in feminine signs for their big meetup, which is, again, just bringing up, enormous amounts of potential for people. So it's like their ability to work with what they've got, their mind, their body, their heart, their intuition, is unlimited. but it's also that wound, because the eclipses right now are happening with Chiron. All right, this last Aries eclipse it's so tightly conjunct Chiron. It's the place in us where if we stay in reaction mode, we're not in creation mode. We're still pushing up against stories from the past rather than integrating what hurt into who we are now and having it help us define what we want. It's like, oh, this happened to me. It felt terrible. I want this instead. Or you can keep your eyes focused on what hurt and keep reacting. But that's a tightening spiral that it's got to go down to nothing. So it's like in this time period right now that's so rich, people have got so much ability to put things together in completely unfamiliar ways. But it's not to slam the patriarchy. It's to cherry pick what in that structure worked and let go of what's aged out. It's like there is so much about the structure that is aged out. It is not kept up with the world as it is now. And it came from a very much power over vertical structure, which had to happen in order for some growth. But now there's just that misuse of power. We're moving into, with Pluto in Aquarius and now Jupiter in Gemini, as of the last 2 days, it's no accident we're doing this now. We're now at the beginning of 20 years of mapping out the horizontal. What do you think about that? Every person horizontal power.
So, but what does that mean exactly when you say we're in the beginning of mapping it out horizontally? What does that mean?
That there is no outside authority that trumps your inner dictates. Okay. And yet at the same time, with the wound where it is, and with Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus, we have to be mindful that if we just, abandon self-expression is not a healthy creation mode. It's more of a trauma response or a child's response. It wants to run into the street, even if there are cars coming. Okay. So with all of this power, we have to learn how to use it to choose what's best for us and then integrate it in a way that preserves options in the world around us. Does that make sense?
It does. Just, because some listeners may not be as familiar with some of this language or these concepts.
Yeah.
Say I'm listening and this sounds exciting. So you're saying this is like unprecedented in human history, the potential. And I've heard that from other spiritual speakers, even some women I've had on the show, that we are maybe for the first time, certainly in our recorded history, becoming aware of our power to actually create our lives, which we've kind of always been doing, but subconsciously or as asleep. So say I'm listening to you and I this is kind of new to me, but it sounds really exciting. What are 3 things I can do to tap into this power that you're telling me I have?
I love that you asked that. And I love the way that you asked that. That's why we're having this conversation, to get granular, because I can get so excited with the big picture. But we have to bring it down to specifics. First, understand that all of this power can overcook your circuits. This is why cart abandonment, if they give people too many choices online, they abandon their carts because our brain can't handle it. All right. So let's bring it down to day by day, choice by choice. When we choose something, sometimes we're moving towards something and sometimes we're moving away from something. Really be mindful in each choice as to whether your story about what you want is updated to the present. Okay. So it's like, does this, I don't like that. And it's like, well, why don't I like that? There was somebody I was on a call with the other night and he was driving me crazy. And I'm going, what is it? Because this is not the conversation I want to be having in my head. And it's like, and then he offered up something that was profound. And it's just like, What were you resisting ahead of that profound little comment that he dropped in? Oh, your brain unconsciously sensed when there's expansion coming and it's going, don't like it, don't like it, don't like it, don't. Oh, so it's like, oh, well, now I'm going to pay attention when something really irritates me. It might be because I'm not a match for it, but it might also be my brainstem, which runs us roughly 75% of the day, does autonomic responses, muscle memory, doesn't need big real estate for that. So it's like it might just be a reaction from that trying to keep me in familiar space. So one thing that you can do is pay attention to your actions, reactions, and be curious. Go within rather than thinking it has much at all to do with the other person. You get to choose who you are in that story at any given moment. Well, what's the most authentic me? Because it's like, why am I being so irritable with somebody that I genuinely love and care about? And it's like, what is this storm inside of my head? And it's like, oh, because he just served up something that popped the lock. And your unconscious, intuition senses when expansion is coming, and it tends to want to slow it down and stop it. So the second thing is to get to know your system. Where is your unconscious putting the brakes on things? Because too much expansion too quickly is not a good thing. It does cook our circuits. So it's like, oh, well, get to know your operating system as it is now. Again, there's a common thread through all three of these things. Be curious. Be curious. It's like, well, is this the most current reaction? Does it fit these circumstances? If it does, what is it showing me more about me? What I want. That's the ultimate goal. If I can say the third thing is let those first two things really help define what you want now, not what you want in reaction to whatever's happened in the past. That just informs it. There's been injustice in the past. I'm a huge fan of justice. So it's like, well, when I see injustice being served up, do I want to rain down on the person being unjust, or do I want to help them choose justice too? Either one is an appropriate response. One preserves more options.
That's very insightful. So obviously, especially in the United States here, we're bombarded every day. I believe we've been well trained in reaction and outrage. And what my feeling is we have not, it's nobody's fault. It's been going on forever and ever and ever, but we're not really trained how to process our feelings and heal our emotions. We stuff them, stuff them, stuff them, stuff them. And I don't think it's an accident that one of the taglines going around today is F your feelings, because if we're not feeling our feelings, we're going to stay the same. And people are afraid of change. It's built in, I should say, we've been trained to be afraid of change. So I do see a lot of that happening. Now, I think you've kind of touched on this, but if you could expand a little more. I'm a regular person, right? And every day I'm bombarded with all this stuff. How can I find my center amidst all this input that's so, because you sound very positive and with what's happening, but if you follow the news or social media or anything else, the message that's dominant is horrible things are happening. But the way you're talking, amazing things are happening. So can you tell us how to shift into feeling more that amazing things are happening instead of being terrified all the time?
Yeah. And it's understandable. Anyone who looks at the world today and doesn't have a certain amount of horror is in that 3% that has no empathy, no cognitive empathy, no effective empathy. Okay. Because it is truly horrible what's going on. It doesn't matter, where you draw the line. Violence unleashed is violence unleashed. It's not okay anywhere. But those are like fire popping open a pine cone. The ability now for people to come together and say no. is unprecedented. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of, the leftover dregs is that vertical, who's on top, yes versus no, us versus them, as opposed to we all agree violence unacceptable. Okay, unacceptable, not a means of achieving the end goal. This is that personal power. When people feel powerful, they rarely need to overreact. Okay, so the places and spaces that are horrifying are actually opening up possibilities in you to do your piece. For some people, it's very small. It's like I've talked to a couple people, and I've got some of my clients who are in their 70s and 80s, and it's like they're feeling even less energized and more horrified. But it's like, but you can have conversations everywhere you go that are, am I going to point out what's wrong, or am I going to point out ways to make it better? In little, whatever small fashion I can. Can I offer a kind word? Can I look at a mistake and make it a safe place for somebody to go, oh, I screwed that up, and offer a do-over? It's like, you want a do-over? We'll just wipe that off the books and start fresh. It's like, those are little things, but it only takes 5% to move the needle. That's historical fact. 5% of a population, when it shifts direction, the rest follows. So the more you find your personal power in all of this, and a personal power that is not at the expense of somebody else, that's what I'm talking, that horizontal. Instead of my power over you isn't that I can see you screwed up and I didn't. My personal power is in, I've had a human moment. In fact, I call them caught being human, CBH, I've had a human moment. You need a hand? Because I have a feeling you've got a better moment in you. You want to try. The more you can do those little things and come at things first and foremost with yourself. It's like, I didn't offer up my best self starting out on that call the other night, but I got there. I was also with a group of people that support and celebrate that it's like, doesn't matter where you start, it matters what you do next, and it's like those moments, it's like, it is horrifying, and yet everybody can use that to go, nope, that's not the energetic. I'm going to counter program and understand even small bites of that, being fair, being kind, being just, not because you're perfect, not because you start there, but because no matter how polarized you start, you move in that direction. That informs the whole.
Very good. So I want to talk a little bit about, I've said many times on this show, I am a firm believer that the divine feminine is rebirthing at this time. And I think that's why so much of the patriarchy is roaring up again. But I do believe that the balance will come. And I'm wondering if there is there signs in the heavens or whatever that is backing up. It's just a feeling I have. I have no proof. I don't read the stars, but I've just felt for a long time that the divine feminine is rebirthing, simply because we need it. All of life is balanced, and we've been way unbalanced for a long time. Is there anything going on that affirms that?
Absolutely. And with where we're at, and it's so interesting because with the Mayan calendar and the long, and their end of their last long count, we're in a time period, the clock had no hands. So that is a place where to me, all moments are equal. So it's like we have the ability, with Pluto moving out of Capricorn, which Capricorn is the feminine structure. This is structure actually belongs a little more to Jupiter, and then Saturn belongs to the sorting of who's going by, who's living with the structure versus who's an outlaw, but we're moving out of that dark feminine where it's, tribal feminine is belonging at all cost. And it can also be belonging over shared dislikes and hatreds and fears, which, by the way, is the weakest bond. And yet, we see this down through history. It starts there. And yet it's like, but that again, that's a contracting energy. So there's only so much you can hate something, and then you hit muscle fail, and it's like, whereas opening up, being curious, being exploratory, loving, even loving the fact that there's this polarization. It's like, oh, well, for the horror that is going on, there is also the beauty that comes out of it. And, the beauty always overtakes the horror. It takes time and it takes effort, but that's part of what we do every day. Pluto moving out of Capricorn. By the way, the last time it was here was, at the birth of the United States. So the United States is really going through, it's got to reimagine itself. I saw a video that one of my Facebook friends had posted about a smartass shutting down a college student who he was saying the Constitution is the greatest document ever written, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, how can you say that when it says, that it values Negroes at 3/5, and that women, were second-class citizens? And he said, it doesn't say that. And it's like, it absolutely does say that.
Yes, it does.
She didn't have the words to come back. It's like Article 2, I think Section 1, or Article 1, Section 2, I forget. It's something like that. But it's like, no, that absolutely is history. But it's like that polarization is that tribal feminine, that it's like, there's this, and then it's moving into Aquarius, which, even though it's the masculine, it's an intellectual masculine rather than a physical masculine. So there's less violence in it. In fact, the air, Pluto and Aquarius, air signs actually have a horror of the physical brutality. They're the intellectuals. So we are moving out of some of that belong, at all costs, talking about authenticity. More and more people are finding, sorry, my cat likes to get on camera.
Oh, that's okay. We love animals.
Yeah. More and more people are finding it's harder to remain performative. And yet that's some of that acting out that's going on. And it's Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus. And then it's Pluto that was in Capricorn. It's really going to our fundamental makeup, that it's like we were existing under a safe structure. It's almost like getting, we existed in a little shell until we get so big, we have to peck our way out. And that's the point that we're at right now. There still needs to be care, because a little chick just making its way out of a shell is still vulnerable. And this is where you get overreactions from people. They overplay their hand because they feel powerless, which is why coming back to the power in one choice, the power in being curious and patient rather than reactive, in getting to know what informs that choice, is endlessly rich. And that's the feminine, because the feminine can take a seed and turn it into a fruit tree. It can take a sperm and an egg and turn it into trillions of cells. That's another human being. So it's like, it is that rich time. So it's like, that's why you want to be mindful what you plant. Right?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I watch a lot of spiritual shows with a lot of people that are intuitives or mediums or whatever. A lot of them say, oh, 2024, get ready, strap yourself in. It's going to be huge. Some say, oh, there's going to be another war. Get ready. Some people say it's all going to be beautiful. Can you tell anything by the skies? Like in the next few years, can you see any changes that you're fairly certain? Obviously, we won't hold you to it, but we will probably witness.
We're going to witness the breakdown of most of the big structures, the large governments. It's interesting. They're going around the world. There's more of the totalitarian or the fascism or the rise of the right. That's the last gasp. Always makes me think of the lemon tree, that I had, that it was dying. And all of a sudden, for 2 years in a row, it produced more lemons. I mean, it was just like covered with lemons. It's like, it's going to seed the next generation before it dies. It's the last gasp. But we're moving into a space where it's going to be small groups. that are built around stronger alliances, although some small groups will still, there'll be pockets of people who share a hatred or share an objection, but it's going to, that's part of that leveling out, that horizontal. It's going to be pretty much between, now and 2026, be mindful what you choose, because that's like the cement that hardens. So it's like you want those bonds to be strong, and strong doesn't mean all alike. Some of my best groups and best alliances are people where we see things differently, but we work with the differences. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I see more and more pockets, and this is what the internet and cellular telephones, it's given people all over the world opportunities to connect with like groups, even if they're smaller groups, and let out of those individual pockets. Those are kind of those nurturing, almost like incubators, if you will, for a more authentic expression. And then ultimately over the next 20 years, rising up to harmoniously work together. It's like my elbow doesn't do what my throat does, but we don't need an argument over who's better. My feet don't do what my hands do. And there's no hierarchy involved. We're moving towards that collective whole where everything has a part to play. And it's really important over the next 2 years to be mindful, one, that that you're in choice, that you have the power of choice. Two, that you really investigate what's driving those choices so that it's less wound reactivity and more deliberate, integrated adulting. The adult in me can show up for all the young spaces in me that felt, hurt or abandoned or whatever. I can hold that space for myself. I don't need all the structure around me to say, if you do this, then you get that. But the image I've got is, there was a meme that was making its way around that I just sat down and laughed until I cried. They had poured concrete on a lake house, and then they all went to lunch, and a flock of ducks decided to take a stroll across the concrete. And so there was this huge stream of duck footprints across their nicely poured concrete. And it's just like, well, that was an interesting choice. You're right on a lake, it's like you want to make sure you've got one eye out while the concrete is setting over the next 2 years, that you're being mindful that you are impressionable. You're still impressionable. So be selective about what you're taking in. This is why I'm careful with what the news is that I take in. I curate my sources very carefully. And it's like, I want a simple recitation of facts. I don't want a lot of story. I don't want a lot of opinion. I want to decide what to do. And based on some of the facts, then I can do a little individual meditation and call on the collective best in all of us to imagine a better outcome. So it's like, that's how I watch the news. It's like very carefully and very mindfully. If something horrible pops up, I sit, I meditate, I call on the universal, that it's like, let's direct the best resources for the healthiest possible outcome immediately. It's like, and the more you wish that, even if you're not there in that moment, you don't know what you are lining up for ease in resolving something. So that place that feels helpless, I don't feel helpless anymore.
Wow, that's wonderful. I certainly have been getting the message over and over, especially in recent years, how powerful what we hold in our mind is. And yes, it truly is. And, I've had arguments with whoever I'm arguing with sometimes, but we really do get to choose.
Yes.
We get to choose, not because thoughts come, you wake up and some crazy song's going through your head. You're like, well, where did that come from? But we get to choose what we hold on to. And that comes back to personal responsibility for our lives, which I had a very hard time with. I remember when I was in my mid-30s, when this spiritual journey started away from traditional religion, And I've always been a reader, and I would just go to a bookstore and just be like, oh God, please, what, lead me to something. And I'd pick up a book. And if it was a Wayne Dyer book, I'd be like, no, because he was one self-reliance, like Emerson, it's up to you. You choose your thoughts. And I'd be like, I don't want to hear that. I wanted the daddy God in the sky that was in charge of everything. And I didn't really have to be responsible for, my life or how it came out.
Mhm.
And I do believe and you talk to a lot more people than I do. I do feel that that's kind of what's happening now, is this shift back into personal responsibility. It's what we choose to hold. What words we speak have a much greater effect on the lives we're living than we've ever been told.
And now, and here's the other transit. We've got Saturn creeping up on Neptune. Now, what I love about Saturn is the planet of edges. It maps out, I'm this, I'm not that, so it really helps us establish boundaries in an organic way. It can get misused, but part of that is the rings around Saturn, it's moving up on Neptune, which is in Pisces, which is the collective sorrow. Okay, so this heartache with Neptune and Pisces, the sorrow is not only there, but now and one of the times, one of the astrologers that we're looking at, the times that we're living in, it makes the collective unconscious so much more accessible. In other words, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but the day that they measure the electromagnetic of the field, globally, the Earth's field, and the day that the Twin Towers happened, there was a global spike when the news went out. The electromagnetic field went crazy. So this is science, okay? This is measured on their scales. So we have now, cellular towers, all these different things. We are now more wired up than ever. Saturn approaching Neptune is one of those where it's affective empathy is the one where we can literally feel in our body. Cognitive empathy is to recognize, oh, we've had something like that happen to us, but it's a little bit more removed. We're moving into a place where we can start using that constructively, okay, that visualization. And Lynn McTaggart, who's a scientist, are you familiar with her?
Oh, yes, yes,
Yeah.
I love her.
It's like, yeah, so it's like we can use our visualization and our collective energies back to small groups. We can use them to help move the needle. And what I love about that is what they wish for other people tends to flow back to them. It's that infinite, that figure 8, which is why it will always limit a misuse of it. Because if people are wishing ill on somebody, it's going to come back on them too. It's like, well, yeah, you're part of an energetic field. If you're trying to dominate somebody else using this, you're going to wind up dominated. So it's like it's got a built-in snap trap. It's like, ooh, can't misuse this. There's a rise of that and a spread of that, even if whether they call it prayer, whether they call it meditation, whether they call it gardening, it's a joining in moving the energy in a better direction. That again is everybody counts. Everybody counts. There is no collateral damage. It's just damage.
Oh, I love that. That's a powerful statement right there. There is no collateral damage. It's just damage. Yeah, I really love that. I had quite a comeuppance several months ago. I live in a fairly conservative area. There's a lot of really, really hateful signs hanging on people's houses, even on their cars. And I think I mentioned this once before on the show, but so one day I had a wonderful, I have those wonderful meditations someday, and you just feel like you can just float around all day. You're so connected and in tune. And I get in my car, and within a few blocks, I'm right behind someone with all these really filthy signs on their car, just hate, hate, hate. And I was like, sucked right back in. And I said, like, it became very clear to me. I can't say I hate these people with all their angry. I'm just part of it. Then I'm doing the exact same thing, right? I'm just contributing to what I want to eliminate. So I had to find a way. I'm like, help me figure out how to live with this. I can't control other people, what they put on their houses, cars, how they behave. And I just heard so clearly that person's in so much pain.
Yeah.
And now I think that when I see all these, I think, oh, they're in so much pain. I do want to make clear, because I always have to say this, it makes their behavior and actions understandable, but not excusable. You don't get to abuse other people because you're angry. We're all angry. We all have pain. But that has really helped. And what I have learned is the more we can release our own pain,
Uh-huh.
the love that is naturally at the core of us,
Yeah.
it can rise. It's there. We don't have to search for it. We don't have to get it. It's in there, but it's just been buried under all this stuff we stuffed down. And as we let it come up and out, then that love also rises within us. And, I do daily inspirations for women every day. I use like a quote from a woman and then say a few words. And at the end of it, I always say, be kind to yourself. And there's a purpose for that. I understand self-hate. I understand it very well. I understand I had a very traumatic childhood myself. I understand all that. And people always say, love yourself, love yourself. I would be like, how? Like,
Right.
I'll get my nails done. I'll do, that stuff. It's fine. It's good little baby steps. But what I found more than anything is to go, it's okay. I'm here. Just a gentle little thing to myself that I normally wouldn't do, but to just start saying, it's okay. I'm here. I'm here. And it kind of peeks open the door to a more gentle, kinder, and then all that pain inside, once these insides, your inner child, whatever it is, knows, then it's more comfortable releasing the pain because it can trust you. And I'm saying that because everything you're saying is so powerful. And I've listened to talks, that like, you're so positive. I love it. But I would be like, how? I'm in so much pain. And so I just wanted to share that as someone who, I literally had a therapist tell me one time that she never met anyone that hated themselves as much as I did. I was like in my 20s. So yeah, so I did want to say that this is a good way to start. Just when you're going to say something or think something, just go, it's okay. It's a nice, comforting gesture.
I love that. And I love that you brought that out because you are not alone. And there are a lot of people, let's get my subject verb going. There are a lot of people who are in that pain, and the self-loathing and the self-contempt is projected onto other people and other groups, and that's like the person you pulled up behind. And I love that you're doing that. One of the things I also have found helpful in doing that, because I found my way to that too, is to ask whatever the voice is, that whatever that a feeling or whatever that, little critic is, how old am I? And it's like, oh, and then I'll pull up my face at age 4, or I'll pull up my face at age 8. And it's just like, I will visualize just holding me, just bear hugging me. And it's like, I gotcha. I gotcha. You are not alone. I've got you. So now let's learn from this. What do we do? How do we take that next step? And there's an interesting little tidbit, if I can circle back around to the person with the bumper sticker. By the way, I don't think it's any accident. They're probably on the extreme end of the magnet in such a contracted fear and hatred, and you're in this dazzling, meditative state. So of course the polarity brought you.
Oh yeah, good point.
I found that, and it was so funny because it was this weird set of circumstances. Somebody goes, yes, I'm sending Putin love and light every day. And I said, can you make that neutral green grounding energy instead of love and light? Let's not inflate anything that's going on. Let's just ground it, And she goes, oh, yeah. It's like, I don't want to love, the behavior. You can separate out the behavior from the person. Person acceptable, because people can change. I've seen extraordinary things happen when people are truly safe and loved. The worst behavior change. And it's like things I never thought would change. You don't have to be the one that unlocks all of that magic. Just be one drop in the river that helps carry away that rage and pain by imagining a grounding cord coming up from the center of the earth into the person who's making you a little crazy at the moment, with their all of their hate speech or whatever. Just see it, connected to their root chakra, and anything that is not authentically them can go right down that grounding cord. It's been extraordinary because there's somebody on the Facebook thread that I can always tell when he gets triggered because of the tone. The tone gets meaner and meaner and meaner of his humor. And it's like, I will do this grounding. And inevitably, it's like he even tagged me within a half an hour of doing this. He tagged me on a video that was so sweet. It was something of kids, offering up a moment of meditation for one of they didn't even know the person, but they went by a yard where there was a memorial for a little girl who'd run out into the street and gotten killed. And so the kids were in front of it just doing a little prayer for the little girl who lost. He tagged me within a half an hour of doing that meditation. He had no idea I was doing it.
I love this, and I just want to make sure it's clear because it sounds like a really important piece of information, because
Yep.
we all see these people in the public eye that trigger us. It's just like
Yeah.
all this hatred and all this. So like you said, let's take Putin, okay? Obviously he's not being a very good human being at this point, or maybe he is for him, but it's certainly not helping the rest of us. So instead of seeing him and being like, I hate that guy, so because not everyone knows grounding cord, root chakra. So
sorry. Yes.
yeah, no, that's okay. I just want to make sure that people understand, because I think what you're sharing is incredibly important. So say I'm someone that's like, oh, Lisa, every time I see that guy on TV or hear his hateful speech, it just makes me crazy. So, but I don't know how to do exactly what you're saying. So could you please tell me what do I do? What do I do?
Just imagine. And when we were kids, we had no trouble. We imagined and we didn't worry about whether it was real or not. It's like, okay, just picture it in your head. We've got the earth, the center of the earth. They now know it's this interesting little, it looks almost like a little, the insides of a tennis ball with all these strands. Picture the center of the earth sending up just a neutral green grounding cord to the base of the spine, just below the base of the spine, where a tail would be if somebody had a tail. And it's like, just see that coming up through the earth, picking up all of the history of the earth, all of the layers, all of the solid rock, and see it grounding the base of their spine, which is our power. It holds us up. It's basically the hook on which the people hang. So when you do that and see anything that is not, authentically them, just drain out like little iron filings or dust, go down the grounding cord, you're clearing out unnecessary fear and anger that is in that person, so that they overreact or overplay their hand. But it also keeps them tethered, that it's like they can't go beyond what is good for the earth. It's almost like putting a leash on a rabid dog.
Oh, I love that imagery. So we'll use Putin again. So I'm going to see Putin. He's on there saying hateful things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of close my eyes. I'm going to envision that this grounding cord going down into the center of the earth. It's green, right? And
yep. About 4 to 6 inches, 4 to 6 inches. And sometimes I'll just picture it like the thickest, strongest vine of this, really, really rubbery.
And I picture, look at it as blackness going down that cord into the earth and then getting to that center and exploding into white light, returning to the love.
Exactly. It dissolves when it comes down through the magma layer. It's like, no, it just dissolves. It never even makes it to the core. The core doesn't have to deal with it because it's like, nope, the magma just takes it and moves it out and distributes it on the earth. What's good for earth? Anything that is not good gets, that fire point, just gets melted so that it can emerge someplace else as something solid.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's really, really helpful. I'm going to do that. I hope a lot of people are listening.
Join us. Yeah, anyone who listens, join us. What have we got to lose?
Yeah, we need tools on how to deal with this because it's really unprecedented.
Yeah.
We've never been in times like this. So we need tools on how to stay centered and help us move to a better place, because this hatred and division, it just can't stand. We can't keep living like this. So
no.
So Were you going to say something else?
I was just going to say, imagine if the people that hear this tell even a few people, we're coming up on that 5%.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point. I love that. Lisa, thank you so much for being here. You are just a wealth of information, and I love that your energy is so positive. Before we close, please, can you tell people what you're up to, where they can see you, contact you?
I'm at truthinhand.com, truthinhand.com. I've got a newsletter I put out twice a month that is the astrological forecast for day by day. Plus, I do an overall one for online, and that's usually on my website as well. You can reference that. I'm teaching classes this summer. So if you're interested and you go on my website, you can sign up and just mark the box, when it says talk to me, and mark the box that says you're interested in the classes, because I want as many people to have access to an understanding of where their strengths and gifts are, because they're yours. Those don't change. You can rearrange them a million different ways, but your gifts are your gifts. You came in with them. I want you to have access to them and have fun creating with them. So the idea is that we're going to share that this summer. So I would love to, if you are interested, love to have you with us. And Mary, come play too. Be my guest. So
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to have you back another time too, because you are just the fountain of wonderful information.
it's like coming back again is a good idea, because I have 2 pages of notes and we never even got to 2/3 of it.
Okay, that's good. Well, I definitely look forward to that. Thanks so much, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.